I really want either Joshua or Casey to tell me the story of that lamp.
I will gladly do so.
Okay.
Oh, that's just a lamp.
On our first, so I'm a freshman, me and Josh are both freshmen. Our first, there was a video live stream for us freshmen to kind of welcome us all to WSU. And Mary Jo Gonzalez had this awesome lamp in her background. She's the vice president of student affairs. So a cult kind of arose from that. All of us freshmen got together, and now we own a Discord server for all of us freshmen to get together.
You all have the lamp in your photo.
It's not just freshmen too. So yeah, I own it. Josh is one of my admins, and yeah, we've got like over 1,100 people on it.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. Cause like I attended the COVID town hall meetings over the summer, and whenever she would go and present, like 20 people would just comment in the chat about the lamp, and I had no idea what it was about.
That was us.
That's amazing.
That's so funny. She should sell it on eBay or like raffle it as a fundraiser. That would be really funny.
Totally.
All right, we're all going to join your Discord now to talk about the lamp.
It's majority freshmen, but we're always looking for more people. There's a ton of different chats. We're all helping each other out.
I like to think I have a freshman spirit, you know?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
All right, we can probably go ahead and get started. Once again, thank you all for being here. We're so stoked to have you despite everything going on. Today, we're going to have a really cool student panel of your peers talking about the internships, research that they've done and had, what the hiring process was like, and just kind of what it's like out there in the real world, but from a student's perspective. So I will go ahead and let our panel introduce themselves, talk about where they've worked, and slash how long they've been there and when they worked there.
Cool. Well, hi, everyone. And, thanks for inviting me here today, Ellie and Grace. My name's Brianna. I've interned at Micron from May to August of 2019. And then last summer, I interned at Dell from June to August.
And Brianna got a full-time job offer at Dell. Congratulations. She'll be working there when she graduates. And hopefully she'll tell us a little bit of what that process was like to transition from intern to full-time at a company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Hello, I am Ellie. However, Elizabeth is what's listed on Zoom, so I go by either. I have worked at the same company for 2 years almost. I've been working for Avista. So I'll talk a little bit more about my departments later, but I had worked in 2 separate departments over the last 2 years. And I've also had the opportunity to work part-time over the school year, which I will talk about later as well.
Hi, everyone. My name's Hendrik. I spent the last summer from May through August working for SpaceX down in California. So yeah.
I'm Michael. I've been doing research, not internships, for the last 2 summers. I've been working over in PACCAR with like concrete research, doing that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here. The question I kind of want to start with is, what was your general job / what did your everyday look like at these companies / labs?
Well, at Micron, I think they called the position a tape out software engineer, which at Micron is just another word for a full stack developer. So I was working with a backend Postgres database, displaying data and allowing the user to interact with it through an HTML, CSS web application, a very traditional software engineering role. I'm a computer science major, so that's kind of how I got started. And then last summer with Dell, it was actually for a position called a systems engineering role, which can also be called a sales engineering role. So it's forward facing. They love it if you have an IT background. I was working with other businesses, which were our customers, and I was working under other system engineers, and they would meet with customers and learn about their current data center infrastructure. And then based on like technical requirements the business gave them, they would make adjustments to their data center or design a whole infrastructure system for them, and then sell it to them. And so that was their job, is working directly with other businesses for that. And that's the position I accepted as well.
So with Avista, I started between my sophomore and junior year. So I'm an electrical engineer with an emphasis in power. So I worked for Avista, which, if you don't know, is the utility that everyone pays electricity to on the east side of Washington. There's a few other utilities around. But with that, because I didn't have a lot of actual power experience, I started on a very forward-facing department. It was the energy efficiency department, which is kind of a black sheep of the utility, because the whole point of it is to actually help customers become aware of their energy consumption, and then incentivize them to do projects that will actually lower their energy consumption. So the whole point of this is, because we are constantly having a growing load and there's more things coming online that requires more power, instead of trying to bulk up the system and spend millions of dollars meeting that load, we're actually trying to work from a customer side of things to reduce the load over time, so to kind of balance that out. So that's what I did for my first summer, and then I worked all through my junior year in that same department. That was a lot of reports. It was working with, for me, it was commercial customers, and specifically in lighting. So it's very surprising that I've run lighting reports that save people over $100,000 a year just on lights alone. So it's doing all those energy efficiency calculations and sending those off, and then working with the customer and the vendor to install those projects. With my other department, I worked in GPSS, which is generation production and substation support. And within that specifically, I worked in generation electrical engineering. So I worked with Avista's generation resources, their hydro and thermal. And I worked under a NERC entity. It's the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and it's pretty much exists to keep the reliability of the power grid in check. And then you have to work on documentation and trainings and other things like that. And so I helped keep up with NERC's requirements for Avista and submit things to the regulatory committee. So yeah, that was a mouthful, but that's kind of what every day looked like for me, was reports and papers and technical.
All right, so at SpaceX, I'm an electrical engineer. I was working on the avionics test engineering team. Testing is part of the development process that people tend to kind of forget about a little bit. In general, it's the step between the device getting built and the device getting shot into space. What that means for me and my team was that we were responsible for designing test racks, which are basically big cabinets on wheels, 4 feet, 10 feet high, whatever, however big you need. And they connect up to the unit that you're testing and basically pretend to be the rocket, so that the unit does all the things that it would normally do in flight, so that you can test to make sure that it worked. So I had a couple projects over the summer. The biggest one was for a particular avionics box that was on the fairing, the rocket fairing. My job was to write code for a rack and modify an existing rack from an old system so that it would work with the new avionics system that I was working with. And that was mostly Python code. And then also I had to redesign some of the electronics inside the rack so that it would function with the new unit that we were testing on there. Day to day, a big part of my job was documentation. Either reading documentation from what other people had done working on similar projects, or the original documentation from the rack that I was working on. There was a lot of generating documentation, writing down what I was doing, the steps that I was taking, the modifications that I was making, explaining how the systems that I was building were working and how they're working together, how they're interfacing with everything else. So documentation was a big part of it. And then obviously the technical side of it, which is actually designing the circuits, generating the technical documents that would then be used to carry out the work on the racks, that kind of thing. So yeah.
I have been a research assistant. It was the only title I gave myself because I was helping 2 grad students and for a while a postdoc do all of their research, which involved everything from maintaining the lab, making samples, testing the samples, and writing some codes to analyze the samples down from, if done by hand, it would take like an hour to do a batch to about 2-3 minutes per. And most of that was just the computer processing time. But more specifically, like last summer, I was starting a run electricity through concrete for heating sidewalks project that was fairly like groundbreaking in that there is no paper is on such a thing. No one really tried to do that with concrete and wrote a paper on it. So we had to figure out how to run electricity through a rock. That was weird. But then for a while it was about running, and then the grad students spent all of last year working on putting nanofibers in concrete. They did not break how we wanted them to, and that was good news. Everything went wrong, and that was good because it meant anything happened. And then on the last summer, I started the recycling for recycling both concrete and carpet project that should be running for the next couple of years, which 2 professors and a postdoc listened to my input on what I've learned, what I've found, and what I've been doing every day. So that felt really cool. That's about it.
To clarify, Michael is a civil. If any of you were like, is this part of EEE that I haven't gotten to yet? No, Michael's a civil, but we're very happy to have him here. Okay, thank you all for your input. Our next question is going to be, what was your hiring/interview process like? How did you get your job? Was it hard to get your job? Was it very scary? And did they ask you hard questions?
Yeah, so at Micron, I want to say I had 3 rounds of interviews, and I had a 30-minute behavioral phone call. So they just asked me questions about myself, what some of my hardest classes were, how I handled conflict, those kind of things. You can Google the kind of behavioral questions a software engineer or an electrical engineer will probably get asked. And it was all kind of the standard stuff. And then after that, we did an hour-long over the phone. It was kind of a behavioral/technical combination, and then an hour-long technical interview in addition to that. And the technical interview was a light coding interview where they asked me a couple of questions. They kind of laid out a problem and asked me how I would go about solving it. It was kind of high level because at the time I was a sophomore. So that's a good thing if you're applying for internships when you're younger, is usually the interview process will be a little nicer sometimes. When I interviewed for Dell, I actually only had 1 interview. I had 1 hour-long phone interview, and they let me skip a couple rounds because I had an offer deadline. I had to accept a returning offer from Micron or decline it by a certain date. So that's another great thing, is if you do an internship early, you can kind of use a returning offer from one company as leverage for another company, which is kind of what I ended up unintentionally doing with Dell. It allowed me to skip 2 rounds of interviews. So yeah.
So my interview process is, so I did it when there was no COVID, so it was in person. There was no over the phone. I drove to Spokane where their corporate is, and I had it in person. It was very interesting compared to what I thought it'd be. I thought it'd be really intimidating, panels, hour-long interview, maybe multiple hour-long interview, but it was a hour and a half, and there was 30-minute panels where I spoke with 2 people for 30 minutes each. And so there was 3 panels in total, and it was very laid back. There were other people interviewing in the same room as me. So it's almost kind of like speed dating is kind of how I compare it. It was really weird. But something that I've learned, at least in the utility industry, I don't know how it's growing outside of that, but I've talked to some other utilities, and it seems that there's this bandwagon kind of happening where people are shifting away from the technical knowledge and trying to talk about the technical knowledge and quiz you on it. Because at this point, a lot of people are going to college, they're getting those degrees, and it's expected that you can do the technical. And when I had my technical questions as a sophomore, I was able to answer them comfortably. And it was just well suited for where you were at. What they're focusing more on is this emotional intelligence side of things. And this is something I never heard of until I started at Avista, is that's not IQ, but EQ. And so with what Brianna was saying with these behavioral questions that she was asked, they focused a lot on behavioral questions, and they wanted to know how you respond to conflict, how you work in teams. And when you're preparing for an interview, you don't really think about that. You're like, oh yeah, I just gotta get my answer figured out and say, oh, here's my strengths and here's my weaknesses. But I really started to take a weight on that, because there's one thing that someone said during my interview. It's like they're looking for someone they want to work with. And I mean, you can say all the technical stuff that you want, but that's not going to determine if it's someone you want to work with. And so that's why they are really starting to focus on that. And what I've seen kind of a huge shift, not only in my interview, but also in my internship, because in the internship, it's a constant interview if you want to have a job with them when you graduate. So that was the most shocking part of my experience through the interview process.
Yeah, so my internship interview experience was very, very different than Brianna and Elizabeth's. And that's because at SpaceX, the internship program is treated completely as a 3-month-long interview, evaluating you for a full-time position. So when they're interviewing you for the internship, my interview was a 20-minute phone interview with about 5 or 6 technical questions, and then they offered me the job 2 days later. And the technical questions, there were 3 or 4 about things on my resume, just to make sure that I wasn't lying about the things on my resume, and the things that I put on there were actually true. And another 3 or 4 questions about EE concepts that most graduates would be expected to know. Yeah, and then during the summer, you're working really closely with another engineer, and that engineer's job is to both help you succeed and be a point of contact if you have any questions, and also to be the main person who evaluates you for a recommendation on a full-time offer. But yeah, the internship interview itself, like I said, 20-minute phone interview, completely technical questions. Yeah.
As for me, a lot like smaller than that, because they don't pay me very much and it's a lot less contractual. Because I just asked my advisor, like, hey, I've got extra time. What's some research stuff that I could help a professor with? And then she told me the professors that were doing any research and might have like an opportunity for an undergrad to help them. I contacted a couple of them because I knew of their classes and at least kind of what their subject was about. And then from then it was them trying to figure out if I actually had time or just wanted something to put on my resume, because I did end up working like 20 hours a week during a lot of the semester. And they, as a professor, they're very interested. They want to keep my grades up as much as they can. Don't want to feel bad for that. So I only had like like a 20-minute interview. I'm like, yes, I would like to do that and can manage. Like, cool. Show up to my office next week and you'll start talking to my grad students.
All right, so there's a lot of different processes. I'm glad, because 3 interviews sounds like too many for me, so I would have gone for a less scary option. Our next question that we have, also, anyone who is listening, feel free to jump in. If you have questions, you can just type them in the chat. All of our panel members are going to monitor that, and they'll ask them as they have time. The next question is, did you work remotely, and what kind of tools did you use if you did? If you didn't, are there any specific software tools that you wish you would have been comfortable with going in that you think are useful in the corporate setting?
Yeah, so at Micron, I was in person. I went to their headquarters over in Boise, Idaho, and that was a lot of fun. This summer, I was remote for Dell, so I worked from my apartment in Pullman. And I think one of the most useful things, remote tools that I used, was actually the scheduling assistant plugin for Zoom that installs into Outlook. It allows you to hit schedule a meeting and add in your participants. And then over to the right, it'll show you all of the points of time in their calendar for any given day where your schedules align for a meeting. So that was really nice with the global team. I used that on a daily basis. I also used Zoom and Teams and Outlook, but those were kind of the standard ones. So I would just be really comfortable with scheduling meetings, virtual meetings, and using whatever webcam kind of video conference software that your company uses, being really familiar with the video and audio settings and how to share your screen really easily. You can start a meeting by yourself and practice those things. And I just think it really goes a long way for your professionalism.
This may be a repeat here too. So I worked for Vista, half the time was in person and then the other half was online because of COVID. When I was in person, again, that's scheduling assistant. It existed for physical rooms. And I can remember my first day onboarding at a Vista, they spent about an hour with all the interns just showing them how to schedule a meeting in a physical space, because it is really difficult when you work for, I mean, I guess Avista is a pretty lean company. We only have about 1,200 employees. But getting a space just to meet and talk is really hard. So that scheduling assistant is something you got to be really familiar with. You're going to be setting up meetings, not just like technical meetings, but you're also going to be like networking and talking with people in the corporation. So that was important to do. But then also when I went online, it was using the plugin for not Zoom. Avista didn't use Zoom. We had to use Microsoft Teams. So being really familiar with how to schedule, because when you're an intern, you have maybe some free time for meetings, but your manager is not going to have a lot of free time. So you got to be able to stack that up and again, be comfortable. But yeah, like just using your software, having your video on, and not, I guess for my company, not always being about work and talking about work, but getting to know the people on a more personal level as well is really great, just to make those connections, because it's very hard to make connections when you're online. So you have to be really intentional about it if you want to make an impression on your employer.
Right, so at SpaceX, I was not remote. I went into the building every day for work, but a lot of the other interns, specifically interns who were working on like mechanical engineers who were spending their time working in CAD programs, who didn't actually need to interact with physical hardware on a daily basis. The tool they used was, you're given a laptop by SpaceX, and you can set that up with a what's it called? A VPN, and you can VPN into SpaceX's network, and then you can remote desktop into your desktop computer, which has all the processing power and whatever required to run all the software and the programs that you need to do your job. So in those cases, people would just work off their laptops at home, VPN into the SpaceX network and do work there. I'm also going to answer that question in the chat. Hi, Hendrik. I'm guessing SpaceX only accepts 4.0 students, or can you still get in by other means? That is not true whatsoever. SpaceX, like I said earlier, they mostly use the internship program as a 3-month-long interview to evaluate you for a full-time position. So the only thing they're really looking for in internship applicants is, do you have the technical expertise to not waste our time this summer? And the way that you show that is by putting on your resume extracurricular activities, personal projects, anything you can to show that you have experience working with technical stuff, you have experience actually designing systems, building things, doing stuff. That's what's going to catch their eye and get you the interview much, much more than a 4.0 GPA would. So yeah, just push yourself to work on some personal projects, join some extracurriculars, get active, actually doing technical stuff in your discipline, and you'll have a good shot at an interview.
Hendrik, while we're on that topic, do you want to talk about your Cooks in Space stuff and how that probably helped you get a job / internship / interview?
Right. So if you don't know, Cooks in Space is a club here on campus. We're working on building a satellite, and it'll be launched by NASA sometime, who knows when. The coronavirus kind of threw our original plans out the window. But because I'd worked with the Cooks in Space Club, I was able to put on my resume that I had experience about designing printed circuit boards and designing electronic systems. specifically systems that would work in space, and systems that would have to interface with other devices or equipment and stuff. And like I think I mentioned this earlier, but during my interview, about half the questions I was asked was based on things on my resume, and most of that was with the Cougs in Space related stuff. Just questions about, so like, tell me about the work that you did here, and I kind of gave an overview about the technical details of the work I completed, which I think was really what helped me get the offer. Yeah.
For my research, it really couldn't be remote because so much of it was material, like was sample testing, making, and inspecting, which both requires you physically be in the lab to use the 250,000 pound hydraulic press, and that there's safety rules that says you can't be there alone, which definitely conflicted with every other safety procedure at the time, but also for all of the literary review that had to be done before any testing, was that you need to get to thousands of international papers. So there was a VPN that I had to install into just my own laptop, which that was kind of the only remote tool or anything that had to be done. I would say that the meetings were harder to schedule because people would just kind of shrug off interviews or meetings at times they didn't want to because they just could. But it also, people got a lot better at using their schedule to find when they were and were not available. But as for just research over internships, that one's because all of my classmates, when they got back from internships or talked about them, they talked about or when industry talked about what they do, they talk about money and profit margins, and they talk about avoiding problems as much as possible. I didn't really have an interest in either of those things. I definitely wanted to inspect and resolve problems, which then when I got to research, they also wanted to do that. And they wanted to find out everything they could about things going wrong and were willing to do more work for that, which definitely just vibed with me a lot better.
Research is also great because it usually lets you work during the school year also. So if you're looking for a source of income that rolls really easily from school to summer, there are some internships that are great for that, but I know that is one reason that people also lean towards research. Okay, next question we have. This is my favorite question because I know that this was a big thing for me and I kind of felt by myself in it. And so I think it's a really good thing to talk about. So the question is, did your internship kind of confirm your goals, or did it make you maybe question your career path and want to take a step back and think about what you really want to do for the next 50 years of your life?
Yeah, so I was actually really glad to see this question on the list because this was a really big one for me with my Dell internship especially. So at the end of my Micron internship, I was a sophomore going into my junior year, and my Micron internship was very traditional software engineering, kind of what I always pictured myself doing. And I really loved it, and it totally convinced me, like, you know, I chose the right major. I'm excited for my future career. So that was awesome. But from Dell, just because everything was remote, I feel like it was a little bit harder to get a sense of the company, the sense of the role. And overall, the internship was really great and it was a positive experience I felt lucky to have. But the role they offered me was for a position that I never would have thought of or, you know, really realized was an option for computer scientists. So I really had to think about it and ask myself, could I see myself doing this every day? You know, this isn't really a traditional computer scientist job, or at least not one I would have thought in my head. So yeah, no, and eventually I kind of went back and forth on it. I considered a lot of factors. I considered location, so where I could work. Pay was definitely a really big factor, and work-life balance, and also just getting my foot in the door with Dell. So Yeah, all of those things, eventually led me to accept the offer, and I'm really happy I did, but it was totally something I've had to go through for actually, I think it spanned like a 2-week conversation I had with my roommates. 'Cause I kind of anticipated getting the offer, so I was thinking about it like the whole time leading up.
So this is probably a unfair question because I am pretty passionate about power. I think it's really rewarding, and I love being the reason, or at least part of the reason, why people can flip a light switch and you get electricity. Like, power at this point is just everyone expects it, and so it's kind of cool. And I love talking about it, and and I can see Grace smiling about it because she studies with me all the time, and I think she's fed up with how much I talk about power.
Just the little baby substations. That's it.
Just, yep, the little baby substations. So when I got a job in a utility, which there's a fair amount of things you can do with power that is outside of utility work, but I really wanted to work in the utility because it's a big reason why the lights are on. You get your electricity. So when I got that, I was super excited. I'm still excited about it, but it's hard because when I went into my job, it's like I got exactly where I wanted to. I reached my goals here. But the job itself is hard. And as much as you're passionate about what you're doing, it's a challenging career. And there's going to be times where you're worn down and you're just wondering, like, is this really what I want to do? Or can I go live a simpler life and be a farmer? Or I don't know, farming is probably not simple. It's probably really complex too.
I totally relate to having that exact thought. Like, is this going to pan out at the end, or should I just, whatever, simpler life?
Yeah. So it's not an easy major, but I still really love what I'm doing. And even though I hit those points in my life where I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? Am I fit for this? It's like after a while, you really just kind of settle in and you learn what you need to learn for your job, and then you just go and do it. And so I guess it's different for everyone. If you go through spells of wondering, like, is this it? Then just you can keep going. But if it's just long term, like, what am I doing here? Then that's probably where you should start thinking, like, is this really it? But don't expect anything to always be perfect and always feel like you want to be there, because that's not always true. And I'm the very passionate one saying that.
First of all, Casey, that's a great comment. Yeah, so to echo Ellie, work isn't designed to be fun. It's work environments aren't built with the employee's enjoyment out of every minute of what they're doing as the primary motivating factor for what their goal is. Their goal is to complete a project. It's to finish a project. It's to essentially to make a profit. And everywhere you're going to work is going to be similar to that. What I found about SpaceX is that the high energy, fast-paced environment was it was much easier to feel like you were accomplishing something, that goals were getting completed. It was a huge morale boost whenever the company had some major achievement. I was there during the launch of humans to the space station for the first time, and I went in on Saturday just to watch it from the inside of the building, got access to all kinds of control panels and stuff that the public usually doesn't see. And there were champagne bottles popping everywhere, just because everyone was so excited about that achievement. So for me, working there was great. It really solidified the idea that you get to choose where you want to work, choose the place that means the most to you, and makes it easiest for you to fit into that lifestyle of, I'm delivering a product to this company, and that product is your time and your expertise and your work, and they're paying you for it. Like, that's the whole idea of a job, is you get paid for your time. But to find a place that everyone was happy to do that, it was a great experience for me.
I mean, I didn't exactly go in thinking, oh man, research for the rest of my life, that's the plan, or even becoming a grad student or anything like that. But when I was there, I did enjoy the way that they felt about their research and the way that they wanted to know more. One of them was building a computer model for pervious concrete, and he would complain about his code, fighting back every day, and he did not like it. And then he had a child, and then he didn't complain less, except for when he talked about the baby. But so that didn't exactly help. But when I heard from him recently about finishing his model and being happy with it after testing 1,000 samples, maybe that is around that big. He was very happy with his work, and I figured that if he's going to be so happy putting all of that time into it after finding problems and continuously knowing that you've got to do more, then it seems like a good thing to do. That's why I'm going to grad school at least.
All right, with that, we're going to launch into some specific questions that we have for each of our panelists. So we'll just go in the same order. So the question that I have for Brianna was, what was the internal interview process like? So how did you transition from the internship into your full-time role? And is there anything that you did during your time as an intern that you think helped you land a full-time job?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so every internship is going to have some sort of, or at least, you know, the two I did. So, but they have some sort of performance review. At the end of it, Micron, Dell both did this. It was usually the last week of the internship, shortly kind of after I'd wrapped up all my projects. I had a meeting scheduled with my manager, my direct supervisor, and I went to his office and we kind of talked about, you know, how I felt about the company, how they felt about me, how my performance was over the summer. You know, if there's any criticisms to your performance or any feedback they have about maybe anything you could improve on, you'll probably hear this then. But yeah, that conversation will give you a really good insight onto whether or not you're going to get a returning offer to intern again with that company the following summer, or if you're going to get a job offer. So at Micron, that conversation went really positively, and it let me know that I was probably going to get a returning internship offer. And I actually asked my supervisor, and it's totally okay to ask that, you know, if you feel like the conversation's going well and they don't have a lot of negative things to say about you, you know, it seems like you like the company and the company likes you. I think it's totally okay at the end of an internship to ask your supervisor, you know, are you going to, or do you think, you know, you're gonna invite me back next summer or make me a full-time offer or something like that. So yeah, and then at the end of my Dell internship, when I had my performance review, my manager, you know, just sit me down and gave me all the feedback from my mentors, essentially. That was a really big thing this summer with them, is I was paired with like 12 different Dell full-time employees. And it was really cool. I think I met with all of them at least once a week. And it was like an hour of questions and getting to know me better and things like that. And they would come to a lot of my project presentations and things like that. And some of them I was even completing a project for them. And so she would talk with all of my mentors, my hiring manager did, and she gave me their feedback as well. I guess something I feel like made me stand out is in my internship program, I feel like there was a lot of uneasiness about the remote aspect of the role. And I've already kind of had a job working remote for the last year through the college. So I was kind of a leader in my group, and I would say, if at all possible, whatever nervousness you're feeling inside, try to push it down and, you know, step outside of your comfort zone, volunteer for things. If there's, you know, any like extra committees that are being ran through your internship. At Micron, I was a social chair committee, so I designed like events and networking things for the interns, and that was really fun. Sign up to be team lead, sign up, you know, to do a little bit of extra work if anyone asks you to. All those things are great ways to get noticed, especially for a remote internship or role.
Awesome, thank you so much. Let's see, we'll go to Ellie next. So her question, so Ellie, you kept your internship during the school year. So you had your internship for a summer, for a whole school year, and then for a second summer. So what was that transition like, going from full-time to part-time? Was your role basically the same, or was it hard to keep in the same type of work since you weren't there for as many hours?
Yeah, so it's been a different experience. When I was in person, so my first summer there, I was in the energy efficiency department. And when I shifted to doing work during the school year, when we were in person, I was in Pullman, I was going to school in person, but I was fortunate to where there was actually an Avista construction office outside of Pullman. So even though I was working, it was still in person, we were still going to school, I was also working in person out of a different office. So I was kind of separated from my team when I was at the corporate. I had my whole team in cubicles right next to me. I could turn around and ask them a question, and that was really great to really get my feet under me. However, when I went to working over the school year, I didn't have that anymore. And I also worked really weird hours to fit into my school schedule. So I was working 6:30 to 8:30, like a few days a week. So it was like about 10 hours a week. And then it was also really sucky because I was doing it during the block, anyone who's upper level EE. So it was rough trying to balance school and balance work at the same time. And it's a very delicate balance to have, where if you put too much time into work, then you may fall behind in school. If you put too much time into school, you may fall behind with your deadlines and work. So, and then not only that, but not having the people that I used to have around me. So it was a really, really rough transition. I still got to do the same work that I always did. And the great thing is the process that I always did things, it required a QA from a professional engineer who has their PE. So it's like, I still had that blanket, but I didn't have all of the help of being in person. It got weird when we went online. So when I switched departments, we were fully online last summer. And so it kind of ended up helping me in the end, because during the school year, I didn't have all that support. I didn't have someone there to talk to physically. And so I got my feet under me, and I was able to come into last summer doing it virtually and just kind of take initiative, know what I need to do, make these decisions, and just kind of do it without constant approval or to turn to the person next to you and ask if it's a good idea. So that was really cool. And then I'm even working right now still online. We're not working in the Pullman office anymore because Avista is completely online for all their employees at the moment. But it's been the same work. You just cut back your hours and you adjust your timeline for your projects. But the biggest thing is making sure you know what that timeline is, because it's very easy when you don't have your coworkers around to kind of fall behind on those timelines and fall behind in getting what you need to get done. So you really have to be on top of yourself. You really got to stick with that. So that's kind of my experience, where it was really rough, and it's rough with school, but it's really great on a resume, and it's really great to get the work experience, and it's helped me actually in some of my power classes that I'm taking this semester. So it's a really great opportunity if you get it, but you really got to question, are you going to be able to keep that balance? Because it's a very delicate balance.
All right, thank you, Ellie. I can say, okay, during the block, she says that it was bad, but I was doing that and was not working near as much as she was, and she was the one holding me up. So she was good. Ellie's all good. All right, our next question is for Hendrik. Did you meet Elon Musk, and is he hot?
Let's see. Because of COVID, I never shook his hand. I walked past him once in the hallway and I said hi, and he said hi back. As to is he hot? He's a little bit top heavy. Like, it doesn't really come across in video footage very much, but it's something you definitely notice when you meet him in person. So that's my impression.
I love that very real answer, Hendrik.
That was so much more thorough than I could have hoped for. I'm so happy. Okay, but your actual question is, what was it like to read? Josh is very hot. Yes. Okay. Your actual question is, what was it like to have to move for an internship? Was it scary to just like straight up move to LA during a pandemic? That seems a little frightening.
Yeah, so there's actually kind of a long story about that. We got down to the new apartment that me and my roommates were renting, and the landlady showed up and tried to kick us out. So that was exciting. But after all that, the moving wasn't really that big of a deal. And I didn't really have a problem with it. Yeah, it's expensive to live in LA. That's mostly just an LA thing. But I mean, I don't own a house. I didn't have to sell a house. I don't have boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff that I had to move. So moving for the internship where you're only going to be there for 3 months, it's a lot easier than if you're relocating permanently. So yeah, I wouldn't really worry about location too much for the internship. Like I said, it's only going to be a summer. And if you get a full-time offer, then you can reevaluate if you need to. But for the internship, I wouldn't really worry about location much.
I'm glad I asked you the first question. It was much more fascinating. Sorry. Okay, our next question is for Michael. And Michael just got into a fantastic grad school. And so we were hoping to hear from you what the interview process was like, and whether your research played a big factor in you getting into grad school. And if that's also maybe why you wanted to go to grad school over joining industry right now.
Okay, that was a several part question. The as for, let's go with like how the interview process went. I think it got actually, or the application process, it got a bit easier because of the pandemic, because one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of grad students and of any kind is the GRE test, which a lot of places don't offer. That is a public thing to do. So now and with the fact that, kind of getting international students has gotten a bit harder. So the bar got a bit lower and you don't have to take the GRE. So my process got streamlined a bit. But it definitely did help because everywhere seemed to bump up the number of letters of recommendation that you need, which all three of my letters of recommendation, of all three, two of them come from doing research, both the professor that I worked under and one of the grad students that she had. Then the other one is for a class that I kind of TA'd for, which also is, doing more professor related stuff. But so yeah, that definitely, doing the research helped me get in. But part of the reason for them helping is something that hasn't actually happened yet, because it doesn't happen until December, is that getting an apprenticeship, which is becoming a TA and helping them with the research, is a huge boost. Well, okay, it's a reduction in tuition by a good chunk. It adds some salary and adds a lot of experience to your graduate career. And I definitely think having some research, having some academic history to work on will really help me there. I think there's another question. What was there?
Did doing research influence your want to go to grad school?
Yes, definitely, because it showed me that these people have the kind of personality and interest in learning more that I want and share. So definitely seemed good.
I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that's a really good point. It's so important to kind of find a place where your coworkers and the goal of just the work you're doing is something that you are fascinated by and kind of goes along with your goals. And so I'm glad that you found people that want to learn the same things you do. Okay, so those are, sorry, I just muted myself. Those are our specific questions. The last general question I have for all of you is, did you battle imposter syndrome? For those of you who maybe haven't heard of that before, it's just kind of feeling like you are not qualified to do something that you are qualified for because, school kind of beats us down a little bit, makes us feel dumb sometimes. If you're friends with Hendrik, that can also make you feel dumb sometimes. So you guys want to talk about how you overcame that if you've ever battled it?
Yeah. To kind of echo what Michael was saying about research, I was on the fence about grad school for a while, and I was in a research lab for a year, and it actually pointed me toward industry. So I think it can work both ways. I think if you're at all on the fence about grad school, research was definitely a great learning experience. It, looks good on a resume, so it definitely can't hurt you at all to do. And I definitely think it can be a great deciding factor if you're trying to choose industry versus, even higher education. And then to answer your question about imposter syndrome, I super felt that at Micron. I went at the end of my sophomore year, and I didn't know any of the programming languages they were asking me to code in. I didn't know Postgres or HTML or Java or anything like that. And it was like a 5 coding language project type thing. So I had to learn a ton of different new programming languages. And then they gave me an already partially completed web application that they asked me to extend in these 5 languages that I didn't know for this app that I didn't code. So that was very stressful, but I kind of said challenge accepted, and it all ended up working out great. It was a positive experience. After that, at Dell, doing the virtual experience, I think what was harder for me at Dell was dealing with the different time zones. I felt a little bit more confident as a junior, you know, going into my senior year about the whole internship thing. But it could have been because I've had one before. So that speaks well. If you suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome, it goes away quickly, you know, as you start to get more comfortable in your career, which is good. But yeah, no, it was hard to juggle the different time zones. I was working with people, you know, I think I had a few teammates who were in like Singapore. And so, you know, sometimes you have to schedule meetings for like 4 a.m. or like, you know, 9 p.m. and that's never fun. So I do think there was a really big adjustment to virtual work. If you have any opportunity to, you know, experience working a remote position in college, I highly recommend it because I think it's like a great training wheels experience for the real world. But yeah, no, imposter syndrome is totally normal. A lot of times it's just doing something new. When I signed my contract for Dell, I felt huge imposter syndrome. I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I have a big kid job. This is crazy. So and with all new experiences, I feel like a wave of imposter syndrome always hits me. And I've kind of just learned that I have to push through it and try my best and, you know, believe in yourself, and it kind of fades with time.
I can really speak to that too, having worked for 2 years in an internship. My first year, I felt it quite a bit. And then my second year, it just completely faded away. You do get over it, but you always get a little bit of that feeling when you start at a new place, and it's just what happens. So even though I had experience and I kind of knew what I was doing, when I switched departments, I started feeling that way again. You're just like, nope, you know what you're doing. You can do this. You're fine. But yeah, that happens to everybody. It was a little hard for me. And it's like when I was in the energy efficiency department, they wanted me to talk about light fixtures. And I'm like, I don't even know what a light is. But that just all of this crazy acronyms and stuff. It's like, should I know this? Should I know what a 2L F32 T8 is? Like, I don't even know anymore. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I talked about. But it scared me even more because I was forward facing with customers. And so I was kind of the face of Avista for those customers I was working with. And you just get so scared and tense, and you're like, am I going to be able to do this? And you got to remember that you have a huge support group. And it took me a while to learn this when I was at Avista, is that they assign you mentors for a reason. And they ask you to talk to people for a reason. It's because if you go into something and feel like you're alone, the imposter syndrome is probably not going to go away. You're probably still going to freak out and put all the weight on your shoulders to be like the engineer that everyone thinks you are, but you are that engineer. But just to know that you have a support network where you can ask questions to people and you don't have to feel dumb. Like it's all fine. But I just thought I would point this out, going back to a previous question. One of my friends just said that they wish they could live as a blind person so they don't have to deal with EE anymore. So there's a new comment, and that made me laugh a little. But yeah, just, you know, you'll feel it. Just know that there's no dumb questions. You have the support. Just don't feel like the weight's all on your shoulders as an individual, because it's not. So
I echo that.
Right.
I think it's really important as freshmen and like younger students to develop a good support system, make friends in your classes, and try to find a good study group. Sorry to cut you off, Hendrik.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so for me, I definitely felt a bit of the imposter syndrome at the beginning, but what really killed that feeling for me was when my mentor, the engineer who's assigned to help me, basically, when he gave me one of the projects that I would be working on for the semester, and I started asking him questions about the project, he looked at me and he said, I gave you this project because I don't know how to do it. And that really solidified for me that yeah, I mean, we're all trying to figure it out as we go along. That's what engineering is all about. If you know everything you need to solve a problem, to finish a project, to build a system, whatever, you're not really doing engineering. You're not figuring out the problem, and that's what it's all about. That's what we're engineers for. We're engineers to solve problems, and to solve problems, we have to go and we have to get the information ourselves sometimes. And no one knows all the answers. Like everyone you see is also just trying to figure it out, just like you are. Yeah, that's a good thing to remember.
There were, I think, two major points for imposter syndrome hitting me pretty hard. One being last summer when I determined that the $3,000 box that the professor bought was the wrong box to buy, and I had to have the confidence to tell her, the PhD that's getting paid by the school to do the thing, that no, you spent the money wrong. I assure you, which took a while to build the confidence to say that. And then the next summer, when I was leading the project, you might think, this is pretty good because I'm the one that they're listening to. No. They'd ask me questions. I'd think, I don't know. I'm just the student. I don't know what I'm talking about. I Googled these things for 3 hours yesterday. I'm not the expert here. You guys are supposed to be. But after like the second or third research meeting, I realized that I had experienced enough different papers that I knew what to look for. They gave me all of the appropriate criticisms on the first one, maybe two, so that when they asked shouldn't this paper have this thing, Michael, why didn't you show me that? I'm like, no, they didn't have it. They're terrible. Don't trust this paper. And being able to guide them like that. The overall responsibility of being in charge of the project kind of helped with the imposter syndrome slowly, but it mostly also just persists to this day. It's a thing, yes.
All right, thank you all. Those are great answers. I am out of questions. We're also almost out of time. There is one question in the chat if any of you guys want to jump in and answer it. Aiden is curious, what are some good ways to find projects that can boost your resume and help you get an internship?
Yeah, so I was just typing out an answer for this, but I can say it instead. So yeah, clubs are good. There's a lot of good engineering clubs around campus. Also, and I promise I'm not joking, you can browse subreddits like r/Arduino, r/do-it-yourself. And there's a lot of cool stuff that people on there do. They build cool little projects for themselves, and it can be a great source of ideas for things that you can do. And a lot of the time, they'll teach you really important skills just working through those projects. And also, Reddit is a great place to ask people questions about things. Oftentimes, if you message someone who built a project, they'll get back to you and they'll say, yeah, this is some of the things I use. This is a little bit about how I did it. People on the internet can be pretty nice sometimes. So that's one way that you can just go online, find some project ideas, build some stuff. Yeah, just get out there.
Takeaway today from Hendrik: talk to strangers on the internet.
I would like to say also that it's not just projects, but clubs. So I don't know if I should say this, but I have not done a personal project in my life. No, there's no personal projects on my resume either. However, I was in clubs in high school and then I burnt out. And so now I'm not in clubs as much anymore, but I was in robotics club and a computer security club. And I was drawing on that knowledge from those clubs in my internship as well. So clubs are also really important if you can get into one. And I feel I kind of kick myself every once in a while for not getting into a technical club in college, but I'll give the plug-in that I am an IEEE. It's more of a networking event. That's something you put on your resume for socializing and getting to know like the industry, but it is a really cool club to have on your resume because IEEE is a very large organization for electrical engineers, and just being a part of that community is also really helpful. So yeah, not just personal projects.
I completely agree with Ellie. I've looked at Reddit before to think of hackathon ideas. Hackathons are a great way to kind of get some resume experience quickly. But I am the least creative person ever, so I love to use the internet for side project ideas. I totally recommend it. I'm also very unmotivated to do side projects in my own free time. I love coding, and a lot of people will tell you, computer scientists, oh, you need to have a side project, you know, whatever. I have a computer science job that I work at almost full time, and I go to classes during the day at my after hour time. I don't always want to code. So I think it's important to hear that perspective as well. And what I do to build a professional experience on my resume, because I have kind of trouble motivating myself to do some side projects, is I've opted to do on-campus jobs. I got my first on-campus internship as a freshman at the Office of Technology for the Carson College. And I say on-campus internship because you can look for jobs in your major, especially technical majors, and you can get elective credit. So I got 3 technical elective credits for more campus job. You also can work over the hour cap. So normally if you have an on-campus job, you can only work 20 hours a week at that job. With these positions, I could work up to 40. And so I usually did. So that's something I did. And then after I worked in IT for a while and kind of gained some system administration skills that I could apply to computer science, I got a position with ITS as a data security analyst because I was really interested in cybersecurity. So those are 2 big ways that I've boosted my resume. And I would say especially the IT role really helped me get my position with Dell. They said that that was something, you know, 2 years of IT experience really made me stand out from other candidates. And then the data security role, I don't know, it's kind of just cool. It's actually an entry-level position. So if you were interested in cybersecurity, you could get a position like that with the college and then immediately go work at a cybersecurity company. So it's kind of cool. You can get some really good experience just getting involved with tech groups on campus. And I know at least 3, Carson College, ITS, and Connors College also has an IT help desk. Oh, and so does Voiland.
All right, thank you, Brianna. We also love to hear that you're getting that check while you're getting your resume builder. Always 2 birds, 1 stone, the best. We are a minute over time. And I want to let you all get back to your Tuesday. So thank everyone so much for being here. If you think of any other questions for our panelists, I am going to send the IEEE email in the chat right now, and then I will direct your questions to the specific person or to all of them if you want to hear from everyone. You have all been entered in the raffle. One more time for being here with us today. If you were here yesterday and today, and you come Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you will be getting the $5 Amazon gift card. Unless anyone has any other questions, so we're going to go ahead and let our panelists get back to their normal lives when I'm not forcing them to do things.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all.